Ambassador Kira Chun had read every report about the Vrakthari before she accepted this assignment, and every single one of them had made her nervous in different ways. The Vrakthari were 8 feet tall on average, covered in scales that looked like polished obsidian, and they had claws that could cut through starship metal like it was soft butter. They had 6 eyes that glowed faintly in the dark, and their teeth were the stuff of nightmares for any species that had ever encountered them. For 12 star systems, they were the apex predators, the warriors that other warrior species told scary stories about. Their empire had crushed rebellions, conquered planets, and built a reputation that made most diplomatic missions end before they even began. Kira was not most diplomats. She had been chosen specifically because she did not scare easily, because she had a talent for finding common ground with species that seemed to have nothing in common with humanity, and because she had once successfully negotiated a peace treaty while being held at gunpoint by 3 different factions. Station Omega-7 was neutral territory, a massive space station that floated in the void between human space and Vrakthari territory. It was here that the first official talks between the 2 species would take place, and it was here that Kira had been given a small set of quarters to call home for the next several months. The quarters were simple but comfortable, with a bed that was slightly too firm, a desk for her work, and a small corner where she had set up her plants. Kira loved plants. She had brought 6 of them from Earth. Small green things that reminded her of home and helped her breathe easier in the recycled air of space stations. To keep them healthy, she had packed a simple green spray bottle filled with clean water. It was the most ordinary object she owned, something she had bought for 2 credits at a store back on Earth, something she never thought twice about. She had been on the station for 3 days when the Cubs found her. Kira was sitting at her desk, reviewing trade proposals and trying to understand the 17 different ways the Vrakthari language could express the concept of acceptable terms. When she heard a sound behind her, she turned around slowly, expecting to see one of the station guards or perhaps a message courier. Instead, she saw 3 small Vrakthari standing in her doorway. They were only 4 feet tall, which meant they were children, and their scales had not yet hardened into the dark armor of adults. Instead, their scales were soft and iridescent, shifting colors in the light like oil on water. Their 6 eyes were huge in their faces, filled with a curiosity that seemed almost universal among young creatures. The largest of the 3 stepped forward, his small claws clicking on the metal floor. He looked at Kira with the kind of fearless interest that only children possess, the kind that does not yet understand that something should be feared. "Human," he said, and his voice was high and rough, like gravel being poured into a bucket. "Yes," Kira replied, keeping her voice calm and friendly. "I am human, and who are you?" "I am Kethrak," the cub announced with obvious pride. "And these are my siblings Valinari and Drexen. And we have come to see what a human looks like." Kira smiled, because she could not help it. "Well, this is what a human looks like," she said, spreading her arms. "I hope I am not too disappointing." Kethrak tilted his head, studying her with all 6 eyes. "You are very small," he observed, "and you have no claws, and your skin looks soft. And I do not understand how your species has survived." "We are very clever," Kira said, "and we work well in groups." The cubs seemed to accept this answer, and then their attention shifted to the rest of her room. Valinari, the smaller female cub, wandered toward the plants, sniffing at them with obvious confusion. Drexen, who seemed to be the youngest, stayed near the door, watching everything with wide eyes. Kethrak, however, went straight for her desk before Kira could stop him. He had knocked over her toiletry bag with one careless swipe of his tail. The contents scattered across the floor in a mess of small human objects. A comb skittered under the bed, dental floss rolled into a Corner lip balm bounced twice and came to rest near Velinari's feet, and the spray bottle, her simple green spray bottle, landed right in front of Kethrak. He picked it up immediately, turning it over in his small clawed hands. "What is this device?" he demanded, and there was something in his voice that suggested he expected it to be important. "It is a spray bottle," Kira said. "I use it to put water on my plants." Kethrak looked at the bottle, then at the plants, then back at the bottle. His eyes narrowed with suspicion, as if he did not quite believe her. "How does it work?" He asked. Kira walked over and showed him, pointing at the trigger mechanism. "You squeeze this part," she explained, "and water comes out of the front in a fine mist." Kethrak squeezed the trigger. A spray of water shot out and hit Velinari directly in the face. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Velinari shrieked as if she had been struck by an actual weapon, stumbling backward and nearly crashing into the plant she had been examining. Her scales rippled with what Kira could only assume was shock, and she made a sound that was somewhere between a hiss and a yelp. Drexen, startled by his sister's reaction, pressed himself against the wall, his 6 eyes wide with alarm. Kethrak stared at the spray bottle in his hands as if it had transformed into something magical. "It attacked her," he whispered, and his voice was filled with awe. "It is just water," Kira said, trying not to laugh. It did not hurt her, but Velinari was now frantically wiping at her face with her small claws, chittering in the Vraktari language too fast for Kira's translator to keep up. She was clearly distressed, though Kira could see no actual injury. "My scales," Velinari wailed. "They are wet." "They are so wet." Kira suddenly understood the Vraktari came from a dry world, a planet where water was precious and rare. Their species had evolved in deserts and rocky wastelands, and being suddenly sprayed with water was probably deeply unpleasant for them on an instinctual level. It was like someone throwing ice water on a human without warning, except possibly worse. "I am sorry," Kira said to Velinari. "Are you all right?" Velinari glared at her brother with all 6 eyes. "You did that on purpose," she accused. "I did not know what it would do," Kethrak protested. But he was still holding the spray bottle with something that looked very much like possessive interest. The cubs left shortly after, with Velinari still complaining about her damp scales, and Drexen trailing behind them like a small shadow. Kethrak had reluctantly returned the spray bottle, but not before examining it from every possible angle. Kira watched them go, shaking her head with amusement. She had no idea that the next few weeks were about to become very strange indeed. The rumor spread through Station Omega-7 like wildfire through dry grass within 12 hours of the incident in Kira's quarters. Every Vraktari cub on the station had heard about the human's mysterious weapon. Kethrak had told the story to his friends, and his friends had told their friends. And somewhere along the way, the story had grown into something much larger than what had actually happened. The human possesses a pressurized liquid dispersal weapon, Kethrak announced to a gathered group of young Vraktari in the station's common area, and his voice carried the weight of someone sharing a great secret. "It fires at tremendous velocity, completely silent and absolutely devastating to anyone caught in its path." "How do you know this?" asked a cub named Threnkai, who was known for being skeptical about everything. "Because I witnessed it myself," Kethrak said with complete confidence. "And my sister was hit by the blast, and her scales are still damp even now." All eyes turned to Velinari, who stood nearby with her arms crossed and a look of wounded dignity on her face. She had spent the better part of the morning trying to dry her scales completely, and she was not happy about being used as evidence. "It was horrible," she confirmed, because even though she was annoyed at her brother, she was not going to let the chance to be dramatic pass her by. "The liquid came out of nowhere, and it covered my entire face, and I could not see anything for a moment. The gathered cubs made sounds of horrified fascination. "What kind of liquid was it?" asked another cub, a small female with pale gray scales. "The human claimed it was only water," Kethrak said, and his tone made it clear that he did not believe this for a second. "But I think it must be something more dangerous, because why else would she have it?" This logic made perfect sense to the young Vrakthera. Their entire culture was built around combat and conquest, and in their experience, every species kept weapons close at hand. The idea that a human would bring a device all the way from Earth just to spray water on plants seemed ridiculous. Plants did not need water from bottles. Plants got water from rain or irrigation systems. No. The spray bottle had to be a weapon, and the human was clearly more dangerous than she appeared by the end of the first day. The spray bottle had been given a name in the Vrakthari language. The cubs called it the Kethravan, which roughly translated to the silent strike or the wet death, depending on how you interpreted the Grandma. Kira discovered all of this the next morning, when she opened her door and found 7 Vrakthari cubs standing in the corridor outside. They stared at her with a mixture of fear and excitement, their small bodies practically vibrating with anticipation. "Can we see it?" Kethrak asked, and he was clearly the leader of this particular expedition. "See what?" Kira replied, genuinely confused. "The Kethravan," several cubs said at once, and the word came out like a prayer or a Karskira had no idea what they were talking about until Kethrak made a gesture with his hand that looked exactly like someone squeezing a trigger. "Oh," she said, understanding dawning. "You mean the spray bottle?" The cubs nodded eagerly. Kira considered the situation for a moment and then shrugged. "All right," she said. "Come in, but do not touch anything else." The cubs filed into her quarters with the careful movements of soldiers. Entering enemy territory, they clustered together near the door, and their eyes kept darting around the room as if they expected an ambush at any moment. Kira picked up the spray bottle from where it sat next to her plants and held it up. "This is the spray bottle," she said. "It is not a weapon. It is a tool for watering plants, and it cannot hurt you." The cubs did not look convinced. "Show us how it works," Velinari demanded. And there was a challenge in her voice. Kira aimed the spray bottle at an empty spot on the wall and squeezed the trigger as fine mist of water shot out and left a small wet patch on the metal surface. The cubs reacted as if she had fired an actual weapon. Several of them jumped backward, their claws scraping against the floor. One small cub squeaked and hid behind Kethrak. Even Velinari, who had experienced the spray bottle before, flinched visibly. "See?" Kira said, trying to keep her voice calm. "It is just water. It is completely harmless. Can you spray me?" asked Threnkai, the skeptical one, and his voice was trying very hard to sound brave. Kira looked at him and saw the fear in his eyes. But she also saw something else. She saw a young warrior trying to prove his courage, trying to show that he was not afraid, even when he clearly was. It was the same look she had seen on the faces of human children about to go on their first roller coaster. "Are you sure?" she asked, and Threnkai nodded, his jaw set with determination. Kira aimed the spray bottle and gave him a gentle mist right in the center of his chest. Water droplets scattered across his iridescent scales, and Threnkai stood completely still for a moment. Then he looked down at himself, touched the wet spot with one claw, and let out a breath he had clearly been holding. "It is cold," he announced, and his voice contained both surprise and relief. "Yes," Kira agreed. "Water is usually cold unless you heat it up." "I am not dead," Threnkai continued, as if this was a remarkable discovery. "No," Kira said. "You are not dead, because again, it is just water." After that, every cub in the room wanted to be sprayed. They lined up in front of Kira like soldiers waiting for inspection. and one by one she misted each of them with the spray bottle. They shrieked and jumped and made sounds of theatrical distress. But they also kept coming back for more by the time the last cub had been sprayed. All 7 of them were damp and happy and talking excitedly among themselves. Kira watched them with a smile she could not hide. This was not at all how she had expected her diplomatic mission to go. But she found that she did not mind. The cubs were clearly terrified and delighted in equal measure. The same way human children were terrified and delighted by haunted houses or scary movies. They left her quarters eventually. Chittering to each other about their experience, Kira heard them discussing the spray bottle as they walked down the corridor. Their voices high and excited. The human let us experience her weapon. One of them was saying, "I was hit directly and I survived." Another boasted, "I wonder if she has other weapons." A third one mused. Kira closed her door and shook her head. She had a feeling this was not the end of the spray bottle situation. She was correct. Over the next 2 days, more and more cubs appeared at her door, requesting demonstrations of the Kethra Vunward had spread that the human would spray any cub brave enough to ask. And suddenly proving you had been sprayed became a mark of honor. Among the station's young Rekthera cubs who had been sprayed walked around with their damp scales on display. And cubs who had not been sprayed looked at them with obvious envy. Kira found herself filling the spray bottle multiple times a day. And she started keeping extra water containers in her quarters just to keep up with demand. She also started to notice that the adult Rakthari were paying attention. She saw them watching from doorways and corridors, their 6 eyes following the cubs as they lined up outside her quarters. She saw them whispering to each other in their native tongue. And although her translator could not pick up what they were saying, she could tell they were concerned. It was only a matter of time before one of them came to investigate personally. War Commander Thexoran finally appeared at her door. Kira was not surprised. She had been expecting him or someone like him. And she had already prepared what she was going to say. What she had not prepared for was just how terrifying a full-grown Rakthari warrior would be up close. War Commander Thexoran was the largest Rakthari that Kira had ever seen. And he filled her doorway like a living shadow made of scales and teeth, and barely contained violence. He was covered in scars, pale lines crossing his dark scales like a map of every battle he had ever fought. One of his 6 eyes was clouded over, damaged in some long-ago conflict, and the remaining 5 fixed on Kira with an intensity that made her want to take a step backward. She did not take that step. She had learned long ago that predators, no matter what species they belonged to, could sense fear like a shark could sense blood in the water. So she stood her ground and met his gaze and waited for him to speak first. "You are the human ambassador," Thexoran said, and his voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. "I am," Kira confirmed. "And you are War Commander Thexoran, Supreme Commander of the Rakthari forces in this sector." His eyes narrowed slightly, and she could not tell if he was impressed or annoyed that she knew who he was. "My offspring has told me interesting things about you," he said. "Your offspring?" Kira asked, and then she remembered the name Kethrak and realized why it had seemed familiar. "Kethrak is your son?" "He is," Thexoran confirmed. "And he claims you deployed a weapon against him and his siblings during their unauthorized visit to your quarters." Kira almost laughed, but she managed to keep her face neutral. "With respect, War Commander, I did not deploy anything against anyone," she said. "Your son picked up my spray bottle without permission and accidentally sprayed his sister with it." "Spray bottle," Thexoran repeated. And the way he said the words made it clear he had never heard them before. Kira turned and retrieved the spray bottle from its place next to her plants. She held it up so Thexoran could see it clearly. "This is a spray bottle," she explained. "It is a simple tool used to disperse water in a fine mist. and I use it to keep my plants healthy. Dexoran studied the bottle with all 5 of his functioning eyes. His expression was unreadable, but Kira could see the gears turning behind those alien eyes. My son called it a pressurized liquid dispersal weapon, he said slowly. Your son has a very active imagination. Kira replied. He said it fires at tremendous velocity. It fires at the velocity of a gentle squeeze, Kira said. And she demonstrated by misting a nearby plant, as you can see. It is not exactly a weapon of mass destruction. Dexoran watched the water droplets settle on the plant's leaves. He was silent for a long moment, and Kira could not tell what he was thinking. You sprayed my daughter, he said finally. I did not spray your daughter, Kira corrected. Your son sprayed your daughter, by accident, while he was exploring something that did not belong to him. And yet, Dexoran continued as if she had not spoken. My offspring now believes you possess a dangerous weapon, and they have spread this belief to every young Vraktari on this station. Kira sighed. Yes, she admitted. I have noticed that. You have been spraying them, Dexoran said. And now there was something in his voice that might have been accusation. Every cub who comes to your door, you spray them with your bottle. They ask me to, Kira said. They line up outside my quarters and request demonstrations. And I see no reason to refuse them, because again, it is just water. Just water, Dexoran repeated. Yes, Kira said. Just water, which is a substance I assume your species is familiar with. Given that you need it to survive. The war commander made a sound that her translator could not interpret. It might have been a growl. Or it might have been something else entirely. My people evolved on a dry world, he said. Water was scarce and precious. And being covered in it unexpectedly is deeply unpleasant for us on an instinctual level. I understand that now, Kira said. And I apologize if I have caused any distress. Distress, Dexoran said. And now there was definitely something strange in his voice. The cubs are not distressed, Ambassador. They are obsessed. Obsessed. They talk about nothing but your spray bottle, Dexoran said. They brag about being sprayed as if it is a mark of honor. And they compete with each other to see who can be sprayed the most times in a single day. Kira blinked. That sounds like play, she said. Dexoran tilted his head. And the gesture was eerily similar to the way Kethrak had tilted his head when studying her play, he repeated, as if the word was foreign to him. Yes, play, Kira said. There is something young creatures do to learn and grow and have fun. And it is usually harmless. Vraktari do not play, Dexoran said. We train. There is a difference? Training prepares you for combat, Dexoran said. It teaches you to fight and to survive and to kill if necessary. And it is serious and important. And play? Dexoran was silent for a moment. I do not know, he admitted finally. My people do not have a word for it. Kira felt something shift in her understanding of the Vraktari. She had read the reports about their warrior culture, about their history of conquest and combat, but she had not truly understood what it meant until now. These people did not play. Their children did not play from the moment they were born. They were trained for war, and there was no room in their society for anything else. On my planet, Kira said carefully, we believe that play is essential for young creatures. And we believe it teaches them important things that training alone cannot teach. What things? Dexoran asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. Now, creativity, Kira said. Imagination, empathy, joy. The ability to see the world as something other than a battlefield. Dexoran was silent again. You discipline your predators with water, he said finally. And the change of subject was so sudden that Kira was momentarily confused. I'm sorry? My son told me this as well, Dexoran said. He said you told him that on your planet. You use water to discipline small predators. Kira remembered the conversation about cats. Oh, Yes, she said. We have small predators called cats. And sometimes they scratch furniture or climb on tables where they should not be. And we spray them with water to discourage the behavior. And this works. Sometimes, Kira admitted. Cats are very stubborn. Dexoran made that uninterpretable sound again. You are a strange species, he said. You have no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. And yet, you keep predators as companions and discipline them with water. We also feed them and pet them and let them sleep on our beds. Kira said, Cats are wonderful companions when they are not being terrible. You speak of them with affection. I do. Kira said, I love cats. Even when they are knocking things off tables at 3 in the morning. Dexoran studied her for a long moment. I came here expecting to find a threat, he said slowly. I came expecting to find a human who was somehow manipulating our young ones with some kind of weapon or device. And instead, Kira asked, instead I find a small soft creature who sprays water on plants and keeps predators as pets and teaches our cubs to do something they have never done before. And what is that? Dexoran's 5 eyes met hers. I do not know the word for it, he said. But I believe you called it play. He turned and left without another word. Kira stood in her doorway and watched him go, his massive form moving down the corridor with surprising grace. She had a feeling the conversation was going to have consequences, but she had no idea what kind. 3 days after her conversation with War Commander Dexoran, Ambassador Kira Chun walked into the station's central market and stopped dead in her tracks. Every single Vrachtari cub she could see was carrying a spray bottle. There were dozens of them. Small predators with iridescent scales and too many eyes. Stalking through the corridors and between the market stalls with their new weapons held at the ready. Some of the bottles were green like hers, and some were blue or clear or even bright pink. And Kira had no idea where they had all come from as she watched. A group of 3 cubs crept along the wall behind a fruit vendor's stall. Their movements were eerily silent, the product of a lifetime of combat training. And their 6 eyes were fixed on a target that Kira could not see. Then, all at once, they struck. They leaped out from behind the stall with high-pitched battle cries. Their spray bottles blazing a stream of water hit another cub directly in the face, and he shrieked and stumbled backward into a display of alien vegetables. His 2 companions tried to return fire, but the ambush had been too well executed. And within seconds, all 3 of them were thoroughly wet and protesting loudly. Victorious attackers celebrated with chirps and clicks that sounded very much like laughter. Kira watched the chaos unfold with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. They had been doing this for 2 days, said a voice beside her. And she turned to find War Commander Dexoran standing there, was watching the cubs with an expression she could not read. Where did they get all the spray bottles? Kira asked. The station supply depot, Dexoran said. Apparently, one of the maintenance workers mentioned that they had several crates of them for cleaning purposes. And the cubs organized a raid to acquire them. A raid? They disabled the security cameras, bypassed the door locks, and extracted the supplies without being detected, Dexoran said. And there was something in his voice that might have been pride. It was very well planned. Kira watched as another group of cubs ambushed a pair of unsuspecting victims near the water fountain. Shrieks and yelps echoed through the market, and several adult Vrachtari turned to watch with varying degrees of concern and confusion. This is chaos, she observed. Yes, Dexoran agreed. You do not seem upset about it. The war commander was silent for a moment. I have been thinking about our conversation, he said finally. About play and training and the difference between them. And my daughter Velinari has not stopped smiling in 3 days, Dexoran said. I did not know her face could make that expression. Kira looked at him and saw something she had not expected to see in the eyes of a warrior who had conquered star systems. She saw uncertainty. When is the last time your cubs had toys that were not training weapons? She asked gently. Thesaurus did not answer immediately. Racthory do not have toys. He said finally, we have training equipment. And our cubs learn to use real weapons from the moment they can hold them. That sounds exhausting. It is necessary, Daxorum said. But the words came out automatically, as if he had said them so many times that they had lost their meaning. Is it? Kira asked. The war commander turned to look at her, and his 5 functioning eyes were filled with something complicated. My people have been warriors for 10,000 generations, he said. We have survived because we were strong and because we trained our young to be stronger. And any other path seemed like weakness. And now? Now I watch my cubs spray each other with water and shriek with joy, Daxorum said. And I wonder if perhaps we have forgotten something important along the way. Before Kira could respond, a spray of water hit her directly in the side of the head. She gasped and turned to find Kethrak standing there with his spray bottle, raised in a look of absolute triumph on his face. I got the human, he announced to the cubs around him. I got the human herself. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then every cub within earshot erupted in cheers. Kethrak was immediately surrounded by his peers, who were patting him on the back and clicking their approval. He had apparently just achieved something of legendary status in their new game. Kira wiped the water from her face and looked at Daxorum, was making that strange sound again, the one her translator could not interpret. But this time she was fairly certain it was laughter. Your son is brave, she said. He is reckless, Daxorum corrected. But yes, he is also brave. Kira reached out and gently took the spray bottle from Kethrak, who looked up at her with sudden uncertainty. You sprayed me, she said, keeping her voice serious. That was a direct hit. Kethrak nodded, his small claws twitching with nervous energy. This calls for revenge. Kira said. She aimed the spray bottle at his face and squeezed the trigger. Keth took the mist directly and made a sound that was half shriek and half delighted squeal. He stumbled backward into his friends, who immediately scattered in all directions as Kira advanced on them. Run, she called out. Run or face the consequences. The cubs fled, their small claws clattering on the station floor. Their high voices raised in a mixture of terror and joy. Kira chased them through the market, spraying any cub that came within range. And soon she had a small army of damp and giggling predators trailing behind her. Some of them were shooting back at her, and she was thoroughly wet by the time the chase ended. She found herself standing in the middle of the market, surrounded by 24 Racthory cubs, all of them breathing hard and dripping water, and looking at her with expressions she could only describe as pure happiness. Again, one of them demanded. Again. Kira laughed. I need to refill my bottle first, she said. And maybe some of you do too. The cubs scattered to find water sources, and Kira took a moment to catch her breath. She noticed that a crowd had gathered to watch adult Racthory stood at the edges of the market, their faces unreadable, their 6 eyes fixed on the scene before them. Some of them were parents of the cubs, she realized, and they were watching their children play for perhaps the first time in their lives. Thex appeared at her side again. You have created something here, he said quietly. I'm not sure what it is, but you have created something. I have created a mess, Kira said, looking down at her soaked clothing. Perhaps, Daxorum said. But my daughter is happy, and my son is proud. And I cannot remember the last time I saw either of those things. Children should be happy, Kira said. That is not a radical idea. It is radical to us, Daxorum said. It is the most radical idea I have heard in a very long time. Velinari appeared suddenly, her spray bottle clutched in her small claws. Father, she said, and her voice was filled with excitement. Father, watch this. She aimed at a passing cub and fired, catching him in the back of the head. The cub whirled around with an outraged yelp and gave chaseful honor. He fled, her laughter echoing off the metal walls of the station. Thexram watched her go, and Kira saw something change in his scarred face. "I never laughed as a cub," he said quietly. "None of us did. We were too busy training, too busy preparing for wars that might never come." "And your daughter?" Kira asked as Thexram turned to look at her. "My daughter is laughing," he said, and his voice was full of wonder. "My daughter is laughing, and I do not want her to stop." 6 months had passed since Ambassador Kira Chun had first arrived on station. Omega-7 with her plants and her spray bottle, and her strange human ideas about childhood. 6 months of negotiations and discussions and cultural exchanges that went far beyond anything either species had originally planned. 6 months of spray bottle battles in the corridors and giggling cubs and confused adults trying to understand what their children had become. And now, finally, the treaty was ready to be signed. The ceremony was held in the station's largest hall, a vast space that had been designed to accommodate the height and bulk of Rakthari warriors. Representatives from both species filled the room. Humans in their formal uniforms and Rakthari in their ceremonial armor. All of them gathered to witness the historic moment when 2 civilizations would officially become allies. Kira stood at the front of the human delegation, her heart beating fast in her chest. She had worked so hard for this, had spent countless hours in meetings and negotiations, and now it was finally happening. But the treaty was not what had surprised her most about this assignment. What had surprised her most was standing near the back of the Rakthari delegation, a group of cubs, including Kethrak and Velinari and Drexen, had been allowed to attend the ceremony as observers. They were dressed in their finest scales, polished until they gleamed, and they were standing very still and very serious. But Kira could see the spray bottles hidden behind their backs. She had no idea how they had smuggled them into the ceremony hall, but she was impressed by their dedication. War Commander Thexoran stepped forward to represent the Rakthari, his massive form casting a shadow across the tree table. He looked at Kira with his 5 functioning eyes, and she saw something in them that she had come to recognize over the past 6 months. She saw respect. "Before we sign this treaty," Thexoran said, and his voice carried through the hall like thunder, "I wish to speak about what has brought us to this moment." The crowd fell silent, and Kira felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Thexoran turned to address both delegations. "When the humans first proposed this alliance," he said, "many of my people were opposed, and I was among them." A murmur went through the Rakthari side of the room. "We saw humans as weak," Thexoran continued. "You have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. And we could not understand how your species had survived, let alone thrived." He paused, and his gaze found Kira. And then Ambassador Chun arrived on this station with her plants and her spray bottle. Several of the human diplomats looked confused, but Kira kept her face neutral. "My children broke into her quarters uninvited," Thexoran said. "And she did not punish them, and she did not report them, and she did not treat them as enemies. Instead, she showed them a simple tool, a device for spraying water, and she let them play with it." The word "play" caused a reaction among the Rakthari, a ripple of whispers and uncertain looks. "My people do not have a word for play," Thexoran said. "We have training, and we have combat, and we have survival, but we do not have play. And we have never understood why other species waste their time with it." He turned to look at the cubs at the back of the room. "But our children understood," he said. They understood immediately. And within days they had acquired their own spray bottles, and they were chasing each other through the station and shrieking with a joy that I had never heard from Rakthari young. Kethrak stood a little taller, clearly proud of his role in this history. "I watched my daughter laugh for the first time in her life," Thexoran said, and his voice was quieter now. I watched her play a game that had no purpose except to bring happiness. And I realized that my people had lost something somewhere along the way. He turned back to Kira. You did not conquer us with weapons. Ambassador, he said, you did not defeat us with armies or threats or political maneuvering. And you did not impress us with technology or wealth. You gave our children spray bottles. You taught them that joy could be harmless. You showed us that strength does not always have to wound. Dexorn reached into his armor and pulled out something that made Kira's breath catch in her throat. It was a spray bottle. It was green, like hers, and it looked well used, with small scratches and dents from months of play. My daughter gave this to me, Dexorn said. She said I needed to learn to play too, and she has been trying to teach me, and I am not very good at it yet. A sound went through the hall that Kira realized was Ractory laughter. But I am learning, Dexorn continued. And my people are learning, and we are learning because a human showed us that there is more to life than war. He set the spray bottle down on the treaty table, next to the documents that would bind their species together. This is why we signed this treaty, he said. Not because we need your resources or your strategic position or your military support. Though all of those things are valuable, we signed this treaty because you have taught us something we had forgotten. You have taught us that children should be children. You have taught us that play is not weakness. You have taught us that joy is something worth fighting for. He extended his clawed hand toward Kira, a gesture he had learned from her all those months ago. Kira stepped forward and took his hand. His claws were careful, gentle even, and his grip was firm, but not crushing. I accept this alliance on behalf of humanity, she said. And I look forward to many more spray bottle battles in our future. Dexorn made that sound again. The one that she now knew was definitely laughter. My daughter asks if you will visit our homeworld, he said. She wishes to show you her collection. Her collection. She has 17 spray bottles now, Dexorn said. She is very proud of them. Kira smiled. I would be honored to see them. The treaty was signed that day, and both species celebrated together in ways that historians would debate for generations. Some scholars would point to the economic benefits of the alliance. Some would focus on the strategic implications. Some would analyze the political factors that had made the treaty possible. But those who had been there, those who had watched War Commander Dexorn set a spray bottle on the treaty table and speak about his daughter's laughter, they knew the truth. The galaxy would learn many things about humans in the years that followed. They would learn that humans were resilient and creative and stubborn and kind. They would learn that humans had survived not because they were the strongest or the fastest or the most dangerous, but because they understood something that many species had forgotten. They understood that children need to play. They understood that joy is essential. They understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon is not a weapon at all, and they understood that a simple spray bottle filled with nothing but water could change the course of history. The Vracthory had been feared across 12 star systems, but now they were learning to laugh, and it had all started because 3 curious cubs had wandered into a human's quarters and discovered something they had never seen before. Something harmless and wonderful and strange. Something that taught them how to be children in the end. Humanity was dangerous, not because of their weapons or their wars. They were dangerous because they knew how to make predators play. And that, more than anything else, was why the galaxy would never be the same.